Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the March My Creative Scrapbook limited edition kit. Lately I've been working on getting some of these videos that I filmed, edited, but never got a chance to voice over up on my YouTube channel. I still have quite a few videos to go, but at least I am making a little bit of a dent in the list of videos that I have to voice over. In the March kit, we received the pattern papers and some beautiful embellishments from the 49 and Market Countryside collection. In this video, I do something that I love to do on my layouts, which is use strips of paper in the composition. I took a whole bunch of scraps of paper and I inked the edges with some Distress Oxide in Mowed Lawn. And now I'm cutting 2 pieces of white cardstock into triangles. I made a mark with a pencil at 7 inches going across on the bottom and then going up on the side. And then I connected those 2 marks using my ruler. Now I'm covering the triangles with those strips of paper. I start on the diagonal because if I start at the other side of the triangle by the corner and I am not very precise in placing the strips of paper down, when I get to the diagonal edge, the whole triangle will look a little wonky and crooked. Something that I often do, but I didn't do on this layout, is draw some straight lines to help guide me with placing the strips of paper down. It's really helpful because sometimes a strip of paper will be a little uneven and I don't notice it until it's down on the paper and I've put many other strips down with it. So drawing some lines as guides is another way to keep these papers a little more uniform and straight. I continue adding the strips of paper until I've covered both triangles. I try to spread out the different colors and the different patterns to give the triangle an interesting look. Once I have the strips attached down, I'll use my scissors and trim off the excess, and then I use some of those strips on the next triangle. I place the triangles in opposite corners of this piece of pattern paper that we got in the March kit. It's a very neutral looking paper and I thought that it would be a good background for my layout. I cut off the corners because I know that they'll just be behind the triangles and I know that that neutral paper can come in handy on another layout. These are my photos. I have 2 circular photos. I have them both mounted on some white cardstock. And now I'm going to do just a little bit of mixed media on this strip of paper. The mixed media doesn't end up being nearly as visible as I wanted it to, but it does add a little something to the layout. I added some Finnabair clear gesso to the whole strip of paper. I allowed that to dry. Now I'm using the packaging technique to add some color. I'm using a Tattered Angels Glimmer Mist and the color is Golden Olive. Earlier I traced around the outside of both of my photos so I would have an idea of where to put the color on the background. Once the first color was dry, I added a second shade of green and the name of this Tattered Angels Glimmer Mist is Leapfrog. And you'll see it later on in this video that the embellishments that I put around the outside of the photos cover up a lot of this color on the background. I didn't realize how many embellishments I was going to add, so you really are just going to see a little bit of a hint of green going around each of the photos. When I use a piece of pattern paper in the background and then I cover it with clear gesso and then I add sprays to it, I like to slowly build the color up. I don't want to add too much color at once. I find that it's best to use small amounts, add a little bit, let that dry, and then add a little bit more on top of it. If the color gets too intense on a piece of pattern paper, it's much more difficult to fix than if I'm using a piece of white paper that I have white gesso on. I can always gesso over it. So I try to be a little more careful about adding color when I'm using pattern paper. I sprinkled some water on top of the areas where I added the sprays. Oftentimes, by rolling a piece of paper towel over the top, I can lift up some of the color. That works a lot better though when I use white gesso. With the clear gesso, that technique doesn't work as well, but I did give it a try. Now I'm using the stencil that was in the March kit and I'm adding some modeling paste. I use Liquitex modeling paste and I really like how this stencil created very delicate little plus signs all over the background. I think that's a cool stencil. Just adds a little bit of texture and a subtle touch to it. Now I'm adding one of my favorite things to add to my layouts, which is watered down white acrylic paint. I just take a tube of white paint, I add some water to it, I mix it up, and then I have it mixed in this bottle so I can always add white splatters to whatever I'm working on very easily. I'm going back in with the sprays and I'm adding some green splatters to the background as well. I allow all that to dry, and now I'm adding some ATG adhesive, and I have this piece of pattern paper from long ago that I know I'm not going to use, and I'm going to anchor my background piece of paper and my 2 triangles on that. Been doing a little bit of a destash of my scrapbooking room recently, so I try to pick papers that are nice and thick, have some weight to them, and if I know that I'm not going to use them, I put them aside in a little pile, and whenever I need to anchor my elements on top of them, I grab one of those. Once I have the triangles and the background paper attached down, I'm ready to start working on embellishing the page. To help the photos contrast with the background, I'm making a second mat for them. I used my Creative Memories circle cutters, and I cut out some circles that were slightly larger than the white mat that I have for both of the photos. And then I used Distress Oxide in Candied Apple and a dauber, and I inked the edges of both circles. The Candied Apple color is a very bright red. I think it's a great color to match with the red that's in this collection, but it's just a little bit brighter. So I used some Distress Oxide in Crackling Campfire, and I just put a little bit of that over the Candied Apple, and that helped to dull the Candied Apple just a little bit. I want to pop up the photos on some foam. I decided that I was going to pop up the photo and the white mat, and then I was going to attach that down to the red mat. I traced around the outside of the white circle on some fun foam, and now I'm cutting it to size. I cut a little bit inside of the pencil line because I don't want the foam to go all the way to the edge of the white mat. I like it to be just a little bit smaller. That way I know that that green color of the foam won't be visible when looking at the layout. I'd like to use the fun foam that has adhesive on one side to attach the photo down to the foam. I add some ATG adhesive, and then I add some wet glue as well. You don't really need to put 2 different types of adhesive down, but the ATG adhesive holds right away, and then the wet glue will help the foam stay attached to the paper in the long run. So sometimes I will combine the 2 adhesives. So now I have my 2 photos positioned on top of the mixed media. You can already see that there's only a little hint of color showing around both photos, so I could have extended the color a little bit. I selected a number of embellishments that I want to add to this layout. I don't end up using all of them. Right now I'm using some Distress ink in Vintage Photo, and I'm inking the edges of each of these die cut and laser cut pieces. Often 49 and Market will include strips of lace in the embellishments for their collections. The lace always looks different with each collection. I thought that it would be nice to use the lace along the edge of each of the triangles. So I have some yellow die cut lace on the right hand side, and I'm going to use the red lace on the left hand side. You can see that I once again use the Distress ink to ink the edges. I did a little bit of trimming to make the lace fit on the left and the right side of the photo. And then after I had attached the lace down, I trimmed off the edge, and then I did the exact same thing with the red lace. Now I'm going to work on my title. I used a letter die that had some stitching around the outside of the letters that I had in my stash. I like the way the style of the letters with the stitching went with the farm theme. I cut out each of the letters 4 times, once out of the yellow pattern paper that was in the March kit, and then 3 times out of some heavyweight white cardstock. I am gluing the layers of white cardstock together, and the pattern paper layer is going to, of course, go on the top. I'm using some gel glue to attach the layers. I was going to call the layout Down on the Farm. I decided to just call it On the Farm. That fit a little bit better in the space I had available on the layout. Once all the letters were glued together and the glue was dry, I inked the edges of all the letters with some Distress Oxide in fossilized amber, just so that the sides would be more yellow than white. Then I ended up using a lot of embellishments I hadn't initially planned on using. So once again, I used the Distress ink in Vintage Photo and I inked all of those embellishments. I'm also adding a little bit of the Vintage Photo to the edges of all the letters, and this just helps to bring all the elements of the layout together. I'm positioning my title in the upper right-hand corner of the layout. I also put a branch on top of the title. I like to add some embellishments to the title that will help the title tie in with the rest of the layout. Then I start arranging the yellow and the red flowers around the outside of both of the photos. These photos were taken in 2015, so if you think you're behind on your scrapbooking, I am guessing I am more behind than you are. I tend to jump around as I scrapbook, so I'll scrapbook new photos and old photos, but I was really happy that I hadn't scrapbooked these photos because I thought that this collection went so well with them. I really liked the red gingham bow, so I added that to the photo that was on the left. I tried adding a sunflower and a small red flower to the title. I ended up switching that around a little bit. And then I added a number of birds. I'm pretty sure these are geese. Let me know if that's not correct. So I added the birds, let's call them, in 3 different spots on the layout. I have 3 on the bottom, and then there's 3 more on the photo on the right, and then just 1 on the photo on the left, so they make a visual triangle. I tried putting a black gingham bow on the photo that's on the right-hand side, but then I later decided to put a butterfly there instead. Right now I'm using some foam and I'm popping up the wings. That will just give the butterfly a little bit of dimension. I just put the foam on the bottom because the top of the butterfly is resting on the photo and that's already popped up on some foam. I'm happy with all the embellishments, so I attach them down. I generally like to attach down the letters of the title off camera because it takes me so long to get them properly spaced and lined up. So now I have the title arranged the way I want it. I wanted to add some red to the area with the title, so I put a small red flower there. I cut off the excess paper down by the birds in the bottom left corner, and then I used the Distress ink to ink the edge. Now I'm working on adding a few floral bits to each of those clusters. I thought that these little stems looked nice worked in with the other flowers that were around each of the photos. I also wanted to add some red to the lower left-hand corner, but that one stem wasn't quite right, so I decided to tuck it into one of the clusters instead. I still wanted to add some red to the geese at the bottom, so I decided to use these small red flowers. They're the same type of flower that I used in the title cluster. I layered 2 on top of each other, and then I also tucked in a couple of leaves. Then I was thinking that that one little flower at the top looked a little lonely, so I added another red flower in that cluster. I wanted to add just a couple of pearls. It's a farm layout, so I didn't want to go too crazy with the pearls. I added 1 to the gingham bow, and then I added 4 smaller pearls to the center of the butterfly, and I used glossy accents to attach those down. They're all self-adhesive pearls, but I do like to use some glue to reinforce them. There was a little discoloration on one of the photo mats, so I used a paintbrush and some Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, and I was able to cover that up. That was the last touch. This layout is complete, and here are some close-ups. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch this video. I really hope that you enjoyed watching it. Please take a look in the description box where you can find a link to the My Creative Scrapbook website where you can view all of the current kits and you can purchase a subscription if you would like. I have 4 other videos that I need to voice over. I will try to get those up on my channel soon. And then, of course, I have lots of new videos that I'm working on. So I hope to see you again soon on my channel. I hope you have a fantastic day. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.